Hello and welcome to the season premiere of CBC Arts Exhibitionists. I'm your host, Amanda Paris. 2020 has been quite the year for the film world. Socially distanced film productions, virtual film festivals, and shuttered movie theaters are all happening in tandem with a long-awaited cultural reckoning that is questioning the very institutions that have long shaped this industry. Today we ask the question, what do we want out of the future of Canadian film? And perhaps even more importantly, how do we get there? First, I sit down with director and producer R.T. Thorne to talk about his exciting year and get his take on strategies for change in Canadian film. Then we get a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to produce a film in the COVID-19 era. A panel of filmmakers discuss how we can transform the Canadian film industry. And then we visit TIFF's artistic director, Cameron Bailey, as he reflects on a historic edition of the festival. R.T. Thorne is a director, writer, and producer. His career began in the world of music videos, where he became one of the most sought-after directors, working with big names like Simple Plan, Snoop Dogg, and Sean Paul. He's directed short films and TV series, but most recently made history as the creator of the first ever sci-fi hip-hop television series, Utopia Falls. Beyond his work behind the camera, RT has volunteered for years as a mentor with the Remix Project. And he was also recently elected the chair of the BIPOC Members Committee for the Directors Guild of Canada. Right now, I am about to sit down with RT at the Canadian Film Centre to find out his thoughts on the future of Canadian film. Well, thank you so much, RT, for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to talk with you here at the CFC.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So you've said that hip-hop was your way into the industry. Can you talk about why you felt music videos were more accessible than going directly into film and television?
I was really entranced by what I saw in the music video world at that time. You had like Hype Williams, Little X, now known as Director X or Julian. And then there was, there was other filmmakers, David Fincher at the time, Spike Jonze, like some of these people. And it was a really rich time for music videos, and they were doing incredible things with extremely huge budgets. But I mean, as I look back at it, I think that the reality of it is that I was not in a place or a position to really step into the film industry. I didn't have the resources. I definitely didn't have the training and some of the understanding of what it takes to actually put a film together, produce a film, get it distributed. All these things were sort of, they were out of my reach, for a young black filmmaker at the time. What was within my reach was, the artists, therefore the labels, which would then pay for the music videos to get done, and then I just utilized what I could around, whether it be borrowing equipment from Ryerson or people who had contacts at some of these colleges. It was really about using what we could to at least fashion some images that we could put out there.
So you did eventually move into long-form storytelling, and through Utopia Falls, you were able to imagine this incredible futuristic world and create it. What was it that you wanted to see and experience with this series that you felt was missing from Canadian television?
Well, I mean, there's the obvious thing that's missing from Canadian television. You turn on Canadian television, you don't really see a lot of faces that look like us. If you do see faces that look like us, we're usually, the sidekick character. The other thing that I just hadn't seen, was a science fiction story featuring us, and that's not just in this country. It's evident all over the world, but especially in the States, you just don't see us reflected in the future. And I just wanted to see something like that. And that's sort of where the germ of the idea came to put my loves together, hip hop and how is it represented in the future?
if you had to name one, what was the biggest battle that you had to fight in this process?
You know, there's sort of like a burden of being like, you know, I don't know, when you're a creator of color and you're putting something out, you have to represent a lot of things, you know, and sometimes that is difficult. It's difficult to navigate. It's something that, like, you know, white filmmakers or white showrunners, they don't necessarily have to deal with that.
No, they can be as specific as they want to be.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. And oftentimes, you know, people of color, they face that kind of a burden because they are often the first of, you know, doing this particular type of thing. And within that comes scrutiny within your own community, but then also it's like there's a lot of explaining you have to do to the mainstream audiences. It's difficult sometimes because sometimes you don't want to, you know, as a creator, you just kind of want to express this color, and you don't really want to necessarily represent anything in particular,
right.
Or have a political stance on something. But you know, a lot of times from mainstream critic sort of space, there's often a lot of like misinterpretation about Black art. And what I was really happy about was that the community really rallied around the show. All of our BIPOC and LGBTQ community that watched the show, they really loved it, and they really came out and they saw what we were doing, even though some of the critics didn't actually see what we were doing. So I really appreciated that.
The whole film industry is going through a cultural reckoning.
Yeah. Can
you talk about some of the changes that you hope to see in the Canadian film industry behind the camera through this reckoning?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, you know, we try to do a great job on our show in terms of representation in front of the camera. I think we got, like, if you ask me, it's the most diverse show that's ever been on Canadian television. And then we try to do that behind the camera as well. That was a little more difficult. I can't lie, you know. You know, for me, it was like, I want to be, if I'm creating a show, I'm an executive producer on this show. I want to make sure that I'm not one of 5 people of color on my own set. And, you know, we were able to make some inroads into that, but it was still very difficult. And that's something that is like, it's part of something that I want to have as a legacy, to try to change that narrative in this country. There's a lot of people that are interested in filmmaking and storytelling, especially now, but they still don't have those inroads into that industry. They still don't know exactly how to make the jump from maybe they're doing music videos to get into film or to get into television. And, you know, we're working on that. I mean, you know, that's one of the reasons that I took the role of the chair of the BIPOC Members Committee for the DGC.
The Directors Guild of Canada. Yeah.
Correct, yeah, the Directors Guild of Canada. So, and it is to try to change the environment that people step into when they get involved in this industry, and to shift that.
Looking back, what advice would you give to your younger self, a young person starting off in the film industry?
It's an interesting question. I should have suspected you were going to ask something like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a marathon. You just have to sort of stay focused on really what you're trying to do, and then also remember that you're stronger together. You know, you're stronger teaming up with people that are having similar experiences with you and moving together as a unit. So, you know, I'd say keep your head down, do the work that's in front of you, and remember to connect with others who are having similar experiences, and I think you'll be all right. Yeah.
It's pretty good words of wisdom right there. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, RT. It was so good to talk to you.
No worries, no worries. Thank you.
Coming up, we visit the set of Wildhood in Nova Scotia to get a look at how film sets have had to adapt in the age of COVID-19.
Another.
118 Bravos, take one. Hi there, my name is Garrett Patrick Pond. I'm the producer of Wildhood. Welcome to our set.
And action!
We're in Falmouth, Nova Scotia, where we're day 18 today. It's been quite an experience coming to this point where we're finally able to film this summer with COVID-19 being a thing.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Take on it.
I'll see what I can do and I'll take it.
Wildhood is a two-spirit coming-of-age odyssey. Follows the story of a 16-year-old Mi'kmaq teenager who grows up in a white, abusive trailer park.
Hi, my name is Philip Lewitsky. I play Link in the new movie Wildhood. Yeah, the rehearsal process was pretty intense. We were here for 2 weeks for quarantine, so I was pretty much locked up in my house for 2 weeks. And it was this incredible discovery and opening of this character we were bringing to life.
In order to film, we had to create health and safety protocols in consultation with an occupational health and safety company. We've also got a COVID coordinator on set, and their job is really to just enforce these protocols that we've created. The COVID coordinator then has 2 people working under them in our kind of COVID team or our sanitation team. Their job is to wipe down all surfaces. Some other protocols are that any cast that isn't in our core group of leads also have to get tested before they enter on set. If our leads go down, the entire production goes down. So everything is kind of catered around protecting them and shielding them from the risk of transmission. It's pretty amazing that we're here shooting this today and the amount of challenges that we had to overcome to get here. But we're working with an amazing team who's worked very hard, and I can't wait for everyone to see it.
The pandemic has provided a unique opportunity to reset and redefine the film industry. Important questions are being asked, like, what exactly is Canadian cinema, and who is given space within it? Joining us now is a panel of filmmakers with some thoughts about the future of Canadian film. Tracy Deer, who just premiered her critically acclaimed debut feature film, Beans, at TIFF. Joyce Wong, an award-winning filmmaker who has been named a talent to watch by the LA Times. And Kathleen Hepburn, who won the 2020 Canadian Screen Award for Best Director for The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open, which she co-directed with Elmaya Tailfeathers. This panel is being moderated by CBC Arts producer Peter Canet. Take it away, Peter.
Thanks, Amanda, and welcome everyone to this virtual film panel. My first question for the panelists is, how has this pandemic affected the way that you all do work? Have you been back on sets, and what was that like?
So I just recently finished my first feature, Beans. It just premiered at TIFF, and we locked picture just 3 days before Canada got locked down. So we had all of that post-process still to do. For a good 2-3 months, it was just on hold. But then once we were allowed to start up some professional activities again, everything was happening through the Zoom space. All of the sound editing, some online picture editing, all of that was happening remotely, which was bizarre. But I'm grateful because that work can be very singular. And so I'm very curious to hear what my colleagues might have to share.
Going back to working in a group with people was a bit of a culture shock, actually, because like this entire quarantine time, like I haven't been around too many people. So I definitely needed a acclimatization period to being physically around people again. It was kind of like, I felt like a lot of like physical interaction, social interaction norms had to be reestablished.
And Kathleen, I know you haven't been on a set, but if you want to talk a little bit about how you sort of pursued work in the middle of all of this.
So I've been in a sort of a development phase this year, which is, theoretically great timing, but it's honestly been pretty strange trying to write during this time. I think I sort of go back and forth on these waves of like being extremely productive and then feeling like nothing matters and what is the point of telling this story, which I guess is pretty normal in that process, but it just feels like 10 times heavier, and it really does force you to think about what kind of stories the world needs to see right now.
Okay, so this is a big question, and I know we don't know the answer to it, but I feel like the medium of film is in the middle of like the most monumental reset it's ever faced. And I think that there's an opportunity here for the Canadian film industry to evolve somewhere greater than it's ever been. So what are your dream scenarios in that regard?
I do think that some of the best work that I've seen come out of this country in the last few years has been so deeply authentic. And I would like our industry to lean into that, to define our stories, the stories that we can tell and the stories that we can share. I think this notion of looking outside the country and the big dream of making the global impact, I'd like to reverse the process, that we're not trying to figure out a story that will break through. We're telling a story that will then do the work to break through, and we have been seeing it happen.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think this moment has caused us to really look at our own communities and focus on the cities that we live in, because we're sort of forced to. We have to work with collaborators that are closer, that we can access, and that could lead to really exciting, very specific stories, which is wonderful. I think like we're sort of all recognizing a new sense of social responsibility, which I think leads to stories that address real world issues and issues that are really important for our time. So
I totally agree. I think aesthetically, I think stories that have a specificity are better. So I think it's going to create more interesting stories the more specific we are with the voices that we champion. And also the last thing is just making sure we foster a fun and vibrant community of artists here. So it's something that we want to do. Like, we want to stay and we want to be here.
Thank you all so much for your wonderful insights and for taking the time to be with us here today. Good luck to all of you as you forge forward in the middle of all of this chaos. But Canada's very lucky to have all of you out there producing work that represents this country.
Coming up, we visit TIFF Artistic Director Cameron Bailey as he reflects on the biggest challenge the festival has ever faced.
I'm Cameron Bailey. I'm the Artistic Director and co-head of TIFF. We are 45 years old this year, and this is certainly the biggest challenge I've seen TIFF face. We've been through many things, of course, ups and downs in the economy. The 9/11 tragedy happened during our festival, so we had to respond to that. But this is a year where our festival is roughly 1/5 the size that it usually is in terms of the number of films we have in the festival. We don't have all of the directors and stars and industry and media flying in from outside of Canada because our border is closed still to non-essential travel. It's a very different festival, but it's forced us to do some new things and to actually come up with some new ideas. We shut down in the third week of March, and I didn't come into the building again for months, I think, maybe about 2 or 3 months. And then I did come in. We were still closed to staff, but I had to pick something up. And I walked into the cinema just to kind of get a feel for it. The atmosphere, the aroma, the sense of, just being in front of this huge screen. And this is something I've devoted my career to. I was the only one in here, but I just took that moment, and I can't wait for people to be able to do that. It doesn't matter if we're physically distanced, we're still together, If it's only 50 people, which is all that's allowed in Ontario right now, that's still 50 people who are sharing an experience together in a cinema, and that's something really precious to me. Justice! No, justice! No, justice! No, Not only did we respond to the pandemic this year, but we also responded to the uprisings that we've seen in the US, in Canada, and around the world against racism, against police violence. All of the institutions, I think, have work to do, including TIFF, in terms of who's making those decisions within those institutions, who has the authority and the power to make decisions at senior levels, what is the consistency, you know, if one person comes in and then they happen to leave a few years later, is the work being continued? All of those things have to be addressed now. I'm heartened by the fact that Canada's screen institutions, which is, I guess, my world, have to confront systemic racism. Some of the conversations we're having now have been going on for decades. And so whether it's TIFF or the CBC or other broadcasters at the National Film Board of Canada, Telefilm Canada, these national screen institutions have to take a closer look because they have been asked to reflect the full range of society in a bigger way. And time's up. We have to actually do it.
If you would like to learn more about what's happening in the world of Canadian film, please visit our website. There we've curated a ton of content, from a primer on everything you need to know about Canadian film to an oral history on the Black Film and Video Network. You can find it all at cbc.ca/arts. Tune in next time for another deep dive into the innovative world of Canadian art. Peace.